So I watched Alex O'Connor on Surrounded debate. I don't even know if you can really call that a debate. It's an interesting format, but it's not really a debate. But I saw Alex O'Connor posing some questions to, I believe they were Christians. The majority of the people referred to themselves as Christians. Um, he he described himself as an atheist, and it was 1 versus 25 atheists. If you're here, you saw the video. I don't even know why I'm explaining it again. I thought it was a really interesting video. I'm a big fan of Alex O'Connor. I think, as someone who identified as an atheist, he is not the kind of atheist that I was. I was the kind of atheist that most people think of when you're raised in Christianity, Christian circles. I was someone that, my name is Christian. I was raised Christian. My mom's side of the family is like Roman Catholic from Portugal. Kind of superstitious, not like strict Roman Catholic, but big church, kind of boring, a lot of pomp and circumstance. The priest always has really sick outfits. I was at a point in time like super into church. I liked going to church. I love the Bible. I've read it a few times. I don't even remember how many times I've read the Bible at this point. But I always loved the stories. But on my dad's side, my grandma on my dad's side is like Protestant from Jamaica. My grandfather on my dad's side is Rastafarian. A lot of people don't know a lot about Rastafarianism. I don't really want to get like too into it, but it's essentially like an offshoot of Christianity. But in my experience, a lot of Rastafari, or people who identify as Rastafarianism, they are closer to like Old Testament way of looking at things. There's probably like a weird history going on there with like colonialism and slavery, and like I know like slaves were given like a different version of the Bible where a lot of Jesus's teachings about like forgiveness and equality were washed out. So if all you really had is the Old Testament, then you're gonna kind of like hold on to that spiritually if that's all you have. But yeah, growing up, always loved the stories. At a certain point in time, things stopped making sense to me. At some point, I just sort of noticed this distance between me and like other people when we would have conversations about religion, where in my mind, it was always, well, this is a story. This is just like a thing that we tell each other to kind of like help us make sense of the world. And more, even like my own dad, my own grandparents, priests, teachers, other kids, the more you have these conversations, the more you kind of put together like, oh no, these are people that like actually believe in this like literally. Like they think that this is like fact, that this is like historical fact. Which scared me, honestly, because when you really do know the Bible and when you know like the history of like religion, it's scary to think that there are people walking around that literally believe that these words are true, because a lot of the Bible is full of blood and death and violence and war and pain. And the circles that I grew up in, predominantly Christian, predominantly, Abrahamic faith or whatever, when you realize that you don't resonate with Christianity as much anymore, but they label you as an atheist, and when you don't really have any other way of looking at the world, your only options are either to like conform or to, I guess, like be defiant and like, yeah, I am an atheist. And that was the kind of atheist that I was. I was the kind of person that was kind of like emotionally bucking Christianity. I don't know how much I really want to go into my whole spiritual journey, but where I am at now, I've grown up as a person, I've traveled the world, I've talked to many different people, I've realized that this topic of spirituality is so much bigger than what I thought it was when I was a kid, where it's either you're Christian or you're an atheist. There's so many different religions, there's so many different philosophies, there's so many different ideologies. And where I am at now, personally, is that I can resonate with the label of an atheist in the sense that, like, I don't know if there is, like, a literal personified higher power that I could potentially have, like, a conversation with, in the same way that I can have a conversation with this camera, with you right now, with my wife. You know what? That's actually a really good way of putting it right now. Right now, I am sitting in my living room kitchen of my little apartment in downtown Toronto, and I am having a conversation with a camera, but I am imagining that I'm having a conversation with a person. That's how I kind of feel about spirituality, divinity, a higher power. I can imagine that I am communicating with something else, but I don't really know if that thing is something that I could even have a conversation with. It's just that language is language and relation and emotions, and this is the only way I know how to communicate. When I think about what spirituality means, especially if we think of it as sort of like there's this sort of tension between reason and rationale and logic and spirituality and faith and belief, I like to see spirituality as my relationship to the unknown, whereas knowledge and science and logic and reason is my relationship to the known. Spirituality and faith is my relationship to the unknown. These are not separate things. Life is full of known and unknowns, and if we're being honest with each other, there's way more unknown than there is known. We're living in a sort of like crazy time in human history where we have the most knowledge we've ever had as a species. We know so much. We are essentially living in an age of like wonder and magic, but it's not how we imagined it to be, because we understand so much about what it is, like the forces that we're playing with. We understand so much about electromagnetism and quantum particles, and we can do amazing things like MRI machines and the internet, satellites. We can send rockets to the far reaches of space. We can capture the images of a black hole. We know so much as a species, and yet there is still so much unknown. And as human beings, the unknown scares us. Uncertainty scares us. Instability scares us. But then that reveals a tension. That reveals a tension between, we have these feelings of security and stability. We want to feel safe. But the more we learn about the world, the more we learn that we are actually not safe. We are so small, smaller than a speck of dust on a rock that is hurtling through space faster than we can even realize, around a ball of fire that itself is hurtling through space around a black hole. At any time we could fall into a black hole, we can get hit with an asteroid, we can, and that's just the big stuff. We can deal with, like, we can get wiped out by a pandemic, we can get wiped out by the rise of like political strife and political war. The more we know about the world, the more we realize that we are so unsafe. The more we know that we are so unsafe. And we have to rectify that. What do we do with these feelings of insecurity and instability? And in my mind, this is where spirituality steps in. Spirituality, philosophy, ideology, belief. How do we soothe ourselves and make it so that we can live our lives and follow our dreams in the face of so much uncertainty? And this is why I say that spirituality is fun. No matter what it is that you particularly believe in, you could be Christian, you could be Jew, you could be Muslim, you can be Buddhist, you could be Taoist. Like, this is what we are talking about when we are talking about spiritual matters. How am I supposed to feel about all of this? This world that we live in, this reality, this life that I'm living in. And I think that is it's so good of Alex, whether he, like, I don't know if he's necessarily on the same page about this, but his very first prompt, suffering makes God's existence unlikely. That is such a good prompt. It talks about the heart of the issue. Why do we care so much about the Bible, about the Torah, about the Quran, about the Tao, about the Vedas, about, I don't remember the name of Buddha's, why do we care so much about these spiritual matters, these theological matters? It's because of suffering. We look at the world and we see so much suffering, and it doesn't make sense. If we look at the Christian perspective, or at least this isn't all Christians, It seemed to be the consensus of the Christians that they got on that episode of Surrounded. But, and you know, this resonates with me because when I interact with a lot of Christians or religious people, I don't really consider myself a religious person. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Religious people almost don't want to acknowledge suffering. There's this term of like spiritual bypassing. There's this term of using spirituality and spiritual terms and these concepts and these beliefs and these practices and using them to ignore that suffering is a part of life. If you want to acknowledge that there is a higher power, that there is a higher intelligence, that divineness is a part of reality, you need to acknowledge that whatever that higher power is allowing for suffering. It's allowing for children to be born with bone cancer. It's allowing for predators to be eating animals alive. It's allowing, you know, fundamentally, this could be selfish, but this is like, in my mind, like the great tragedy of the world. It allows for us to be born and to lose everything that we have, from our loved ones, from our lives, from our hopes, from our dreams, from our fears. Everything you have is everything that you have yet to lose. And that's tragic. And that causes suffering to think about. Does that make God unlikely? Maybe. I think it kind of makes the idea of like an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God unlikely. It doesn't mean that this God doesn't necessarily have a capacity for love, but to think that you individually, yourself, your ego, is somehow special and is somehow something that when your ego experiences suffering, when your self experiences suffering, when you experience suffering, that this is somehow wrong. It can't be wrong. It's happening. There's no other way to describe it other than that it's happening. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether you want to call it good, whether you want to call it evil, whether you want to call it suffering, or whatever you want to call it, a rose by any other name still smells just as sweet. You're experiencing suffering, and you gotta do something about that. You gotta think about that. You gotta come to some sort of conclusion about how do I live my life when suffering is real. Because if you're just gonna tell yourself it's not real, or if you're gonna find yourself in positions where the suffering is gonna smack you across the face, and you're not gonna know what to do about it, and you're gonna tell yourself, oh, maybe I did something wrong, maybe I have to change my behavior. And a lot of the times, you don't have to change your behavior just because something bad happened to you. Bad things happen. It's okay to say, bad things happen. Does that make God unlikely? I don't think it makes a higher power unlikely, but it does headbutt this idea that whatever this higher power is that we are in the hands of, whatever God that is dreaming this reality that we are experiencing, it may or may not necessarily care about us, about you, about me, about what we care about. And that's fine. A lot of the way that we relate to higher powers, a lot of the way that we relate to God is the same way that we relate to our parents. A lot of people have very caring, very loving parents that are deeply invested in you as an individual and your passion and your future, and what you care about, they care about, and what you don't care about, they don't care about, and what you're scared of, they feel your fear, and they are there with you. You can feel them. You can feel their support. You can feel their love. Not everybody has parents like that. A lot of people have absent parents. They're not even in the picture. A lot of people have parents that are in the picture, but they're abusive, or they're neglectful, or they're emotionally immature. And I feel like a lot of people will relate to God the same way they relate to their parents, because that is their relationship to have someone with higher power over them, someone with authority over them. I'm not really claiming to have a lot of answers. I can really only speak to my experience. And in my experience, you got to be fluid. Sometimes it's going to feel like God is on your side and he has your back and he's like supporting you. And sometimes it's going to feel like you are wrestling with God. Sometimes it's going to feel like God wants something from you. And sometimes you got to bow and you got to you got to humble yourself, and you have to accept the path that God has put you on. And then other times you got to fight. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, even in the Bible, there's the whole story of, I can't remember his name, it might have been Abraham. Abraham wrestled with God. Or Israel. That's where the term Israel, that's where the name Israel comes from, right? He who wrestles with God. God loves a fighter. That's an expression. What I'm trying to get at is this idea of you need to be fluid with your beliefs. I am not someone that really holds in high regard this idea of you need to be philosophically consistent. The world is philosophically inconsistent. The world, the universe, life, whatever, it doesn't really owe you an explanation or understanding. Understanding and confusion are both valid states to be in when you're looking at the world. You're going to understand some things, you're going to not understand some things. We have our relationship with the known and we have our relationship with the unknown. And I would just say, I think I kind of started this video just like wanting to share my thoughts on these prompts. And now it's just sort of dialing in on this relationship that I have with spirituality, this relationship that I have with the unknown. And being curious about different ways of looking at this issue is a good thing, in my opinion. I would be interested in hearing Alex, again, like a big fan of Alex, if he were to do another sort of Surrounded. I know on his content he talks to a lot of people. I guess Surrounded is really more just good for him as like a content creator, as an influencer, just to get his name out there. But I would just like him talking to different ways of viewing spirituality, and if he can come up with prompts that were more, a lot of these prompts are like, God commands genocide in the Bible. I remember the video, I watched it a while ago. People were trying to argue that God didn't command genocide in the Bible. Of course God commanded genocide in the Bible. Israelites killed a bunch of fucking people. And not just a bunch of like individual people. It was like kill everyone, kill them, kill the parent, kill the men, kill the women, kill the children, kill the fucking animals, bro. Don't even keep the goats. What the goats do? Who the goats praying to? There is insufficient evidence to believe in the resurrection. Again, we're talking about our relationship to the known and the unknown. Weird shit happens. Did Jesus come back from the dead? I don't know. I wasn't there. But does that even really matter? Not really. Let's just look at it like a story. Let's look at it as there is this idea of being able to transcend the human experience. And this is true in, as far as I can tell, every single organized or disorganized spiritual path has some sort of acknowledgement of we are trying to transcend something, we are trying to rise above something. There's an issue that we are facing at this level, at this frequency, at this vibration. There's some sort of friction, and we believe that if we can move to like a higher plane of some level, then we won't have to deal with this friction. And some people will call that heaven, some people will call that nirvana, some people will call that whatever the hell you want to call it. We're trying to do better, and we're trying to feel better. Whether or not and I think like the story of the resurrection, I love the story of Jesus. What I take away from that story is less, oh wow, this dude died and came back from the dead, and if I believe in him and if I believe in the God that he is believing in, then I too can rise from the dead. Maybe, fuck it, I don't know. I think the most important thing is that Jesus, as an act of compassion, demonstrated that you can choose suffering, you can embrace suffering, and you can find peace. I think that is the way bigger takeaway. That is way more powerful. Because even if, like, let's say modern medicine tomorrow comes out with a process or a procedure or a surgery or whatever, where you didn't have to die anymore, where death has been solved and no more will we have to worry about our lives ending. The world is not suddenly a better place in that situation. The world is still fucked. We're still fighting over resources. We're still have too many people in too small amount of space. We have like shitty leaders who are corrupt, and we have food that isn't good for us, and we have air that isn't good for us. We still have a lot of work to do other than, hey, people die. I think the bigger thing that if more people realize that suffering is something that can be embraced, and that on the other side of embracing that suffering is a lot of peace and a lot of joy and a lot of freedom. Once you no longer have to live a life where you are avoiding suffering, you actually get to live a life of freedom. You imagine if you are someone that struggles with this, imagine how your life would be if you didn't have to fear, if you didn't have to fear discomfort, if you didn't have to fear pain, if you knew that no matter how much suffering you experience, no matter how much pain you experience, no matter how much fear you experience, you would get to the other side of that, and there would be peace there waiting for you. There would be contentedness there waiting for you. That is actually the life you are living, whether you realize it or not. If you're scared of, and like when I say if, I'm scared of pain. I'm scared of suffering. I'm not trying to act as if I'm some transcendent being. But I can't, I'm 29 years old. I literally have lost count of the times that I have been in a situation where every cell in my body is telling me to run, to conform, to hide, to just stop feeling the pain. Just stop feeling the pain. Just get it out. Just I don't want to feel this anymore. I can't tell you how many times it has benefited me to take some deep breaths, to take a step back from my life. In Buddhism, we say like enter the Buddha mind. I don't know why I say we. I'm not really necessarily a Buddhist, but just taking a step back, just sitting in the seat of observation, trying to be a witness, trying to be an unjudgmental observer of these negative experiences that you're facing. And then the next thing you know, the pain is gone, the suffering is gone, and you're fine. And whatever it was that you wanted on the other side of that suffering, you have. Whether it be a job, whether it be a better relationship with your partner, whether it be writing a book. I've been trying to write a lot more. A lot of times when I write, I've been having to like get over a lot of like emotional things that come up. Things like I'm not writing well, I have bad handwriting, I don't know how to spell certain things, and now I can write, and I like what I write, and it's fun to write, and I only would have ever reached this place of it feels good to do this. The only way I reached this place is by embracing suffering. Not to say that, being crucified is obviously like a way bigger amount of suffering, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't survive their suffering. I've lost a lot of people that died in very painful ways, and, knock on wood, I'll die in peace, but who knows? Like, if you look at the majority of human history, most people die in pain, in fear, alone, scared. A lot of the times we'll die of things that we didn't even understand, we didn't even know what bacteria was. We didn't really understand how any of this fucking life thing works. Imagine having like a stroke or a seizure in the Middle Ages. Imagine being next to someone who just had a fucking heart attack and like, whoa, God just came down and killed that guy. Holy shit. It's hard to embrace suffering knowing what the stakes are, the stakes being your life. But it's really the only way to freedom, in my opinion. It's the only way to liberation. And when I look at the world now, again, I grew up on Rastafarian culture. I grew up in like the church, and there's always this narrative in our society that is faint, but it's always present, of freedom, of liberation, of freeing your shackles, and heaven and nirvana, and everyone wants to reach nirvana, but no one wants to die. You gotta be okay with dying. Not okay with it. Obviously, we all want our lives to mean something. We want our deaths to mean something. But you can't live a life in fear. It feels like it's how we enter where we are now. It's how we enter a place where every time you turn on the news, there's fear. All of our leaders are fear-mongering us. We gotta learn how to hold on to ourselves, hold on to our wisdom, hold on to our rational mind in the midst of fear. And I think that is what spiritual practices are for, and that is what the good of spirituality is, as someone who used to identify as an atheist. Are there any other prompts I want to talk about? Jesus never claimed to be God. Yeah, similar to the insufficient evidence to believe in the resurrection, why does it even matter if Jesus claimed to be God? I'm of the opinion that, like, you know, if God is everything, then I am also God, and you are also God, and then if you want to, kind of what I was talking about before, of like, suffering is also God, and joy is also God, and love is God, and hate is God, and like, if God is sort of like a name that we are ascribing to this or that, so that we can start to talk about our relationship to that thing, much in the same way I was talking about, where like I can have a conversation with my wife who's a person and we can have a back and forth, but there's certain things in our life, like this camera, like God, like the internet, like money, so many things that we can have a relationship with that is just one-sided. There's that term parasocial relationship. I don't know if that really applies here, but I kind of thought of it. But it's just a one-way relationship. But it's still a relationship, and we can use that inclination of as humans to relate to things and personify things, and we can use that to explore topics, essentially. If Jesus claimed to be God, even if he didn't claim to be God, if he is or isn't God, it doesn't really matter as much as what he's saying. It doesn't really matter as much as... all of those things can be true in different contexts. And why does it even really matter? What really matters is, in this moment right now, as you hear my voice, as you breathe this air, as your heart beats, at any given moment, what are you trying to do? And what thought, what belief, what ideology, what prayer, what meditation, what manifestation, what affirmation, what can you do to help you get what you need? What can you do to help you get what you want? How can you soothe yourself in the face of fear and discomfort and suffering and pain? That is what's more important. And I could speak for hours about all of the different things that I've learned over the years about what helps me, but ultimately you as an individual need to figure out what will help you. Because you're you, and no one can know you as well as you know you. No one else is living life through your eyes. And that's so important, and that's so precious, and that's so valuable, and you shouldn't let anyone take that away from you.